On behalf of Scientia, we're happy to honor and remember Professor Bachner and the Hudspeths today as we welcome this year's Bachner Lecture speaker, Ifeoma Ajunwa. Dr. Ajunwa is an award-winning law professor and author of the acclaimed book, The Quantified Worker, published by Cambridge University Press. Her book has been featured on NPR, Marketplace, Wired, and many other news outlets. At Emory University, she is Asa Griggs Candler Professor of Law and founding director of the AI and the Future of Work program at Emory Law School. She's also the Associate Dean for Projects and Partnerships at Emory Law School. Dr. Ajunwa is the 2019 recipient of the NSF Career Award, Career Award, NSF Career Award, and a 2018 recipient of the Derek Bell Award from the Association of American Law Schools. She is very active as a columnist, keynote speaker, and board member and consultant for Fortune 500 companies. After Dr. Ajunwa's lecture, we'll have a 10-minute Q&A, and then we cordially invite you into the lobby for a reception. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ajunwa.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's my first time to Rice University, and I'm so excited to discover your campus. It's a lovely, beautiful campus, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to come to my, to the talk. And I'm excited to share from my book, The Quantified Worker. So, just to begin, usually the main question I always get, right, is why the quantified worker, right? What led you to write this book? And it is quite an interesting story because this came out of my doctoral research at Columbia University, but it is actually not the main focus of my dissertation. So my dissertation had focused on the re-entry of the formerly incarcerated, and that meant that I interviewed formerly incarcerated men and women who were trying to re-enter the workforce. But I found that there was sort of a recurring refrain, something that I kept hearing over and over, which was, I hate computers. And at first I thought, okay, is this like an issue of someone who has been incarcerated since the 90s and therefore really missed the whole revolution to personal computing? Is this a question of computer illiteracy or something like that? But actually, no. What it turned out to be was that these men and women who were leaving prison or entering society, they were being told, all you need to do is get your GED, right? All you need to do is get your job skills. And then you march into, that retail or other low-wage work, and you look the manager in the eye and you shake his hand, nice firm handshake, you're dressed properly, and you explain your situation, and you tell him that you are rehabilitated, you're ready to work, and you get the job. So they were really being sold this idea of, yes, you can be rehabilitated. Yes, you can rejoin the workforce. But what they were finding was that that wasn't the reality. The reality was, whenever they were looking for a job, they found they had to apply online on a computer. And then they never heard back. It was like they had never applied. They did not even so much as get a rejection most of the time. And so that got me to thinking that this is happening to so many of these formerly incarcerated men and women. Is this a systemic issue, right? And it also got me to thinking, I had somehow imagined that the turn to digitalization, right, the turn to automation was going to actually open doors for a wider group of people. Because I was imagining, okay, well, you are a company, you can't go out and interview everybody everywhere, but now everybody anywhere can just go online and apply, right? So supposedly this means more opportunity. And this was not true from what I was hearing from these men and women. So that got me to start looking at automated hiring, the use of AI in hiring. So yes, I wrote my dissertation on reentry, but after that, I was still thinking about this and I wanted to really investigate what was happening. So that's how I came to the quantified worker. So, what do I really mean by the quantified worker when I say the quantified worker? What I mean by that is, yes, we have our system of capitalism, which requires a division of labor, right? And that division of labor has led to different theories of how to manage the workplace, how to manage production in a capitalist system. One of those theories is scientific management, which came about in the 1900s. This was Francis Winslow Taylor, right? Who is actually from a prominent Quaker family, and he was thinking about how do we manage the workplace in such a way that you can have mutual prosperity for the manager and also the worker. And for him, he felt that we needed to study how each and every single job was done to figure out the most efficient way to do that job, such that all workers would be able to learn it and therefore would be able to be efficient in how they conduct their work. So if scientific management then was reiterated to become workforce science. So when Francis Winslow Taylor was focused on scientific management, he was focused on the job itself, like breaking it down into specific units so such that anyone could be taught how to do it. Workforce science kind of turned its focus more on the worker, right? And it was more focused on figuring out how is the worker doing the job? How is the worker spending their time, right? You might have heard of like worker analytics, right? Data analytics in the workplace. That's all part of workforce science, right? But what I'm arguing now is that since workforce science, we have a third iteration, which is the quantified worker, which actually has departed from what Francis Winslow Taylor had in mind. It has actually departed from the main tenets of Taylorism, which was actually about mutual prosperity for both the manager and the worker. With the quantified worker, the worker is now subject. The worker is only meant to fulfill the utmost productivity for the manager, right? So with the quantified worker, you're now turning the spotlight on the worker, not just the work itself, and you're looking at the worker's behaviors, you're looking at the worker's attributes. So in terms of the workers' behaviors, you have AI-powered productivity apps that are checking out what the worker is doing. You have wearable technologies in the workplace that's literally counting like the worker's steps. It's mapping where the worker is in the workplace. You also have social media monitoring where you're checking what the worker is doing on social media. Then you have workplace wellness programs, which, yes, they purport to be a benefit to the worker, but a lot of them are actually calculating, is this worker healthy, unhealthy? Is this worker really a liability for the company, right? In terms of the health insurance premiums. And then finally, you come to quantified attributes, which I think is much more insidious than even the quantified behaviors. Because the idea is that you can change behaviors. Can you change attributes? No. The idea is that an attribute is something that's innate in the worker. So now you're looking at what you can see as being innate in the worker. Workers are being classified as, oh, you are trustworthy because when I interviewed you, I could see from your facial expressions. So something innate in you makes me think you're trustworthy, right? You have now genetic testing as part of workplace wellness programs, which is also looking at, the innate qualities, the innate DNA of the worker. Then you have personality testing as part of the job, which is looking at, oh, Your personality makes you a good worker, your personality makes you not a good worker. And that's problematic because of the ways that it can introduce a divide between people who are deemed employable and people who are deemed unemployable, and could then create a permanent underclass of people that no one hires. So today I'm going to focus actually on automated hiring and some of the issues with it. But before that, I want to give you a quick story, a true story about personality testing and its dangers. So, in the course of my book, I interviewed a father who was also an attorney. So, the man's name is Roland Beam. His son, Kyle Beam, was a fantastic student, got a perfect SAT score, got into college, a top college, but during his second year of college, he was diagnosed with a mental health disorder, right? So, a mental illness. So he decided to take time away from school, move back home, and get well before resuming his studies. When he moved home and started his treatment, he still wanted to be productive, earn money. So he started to apply for jobs all around, and he primarily focused on what you would consider low stress jobs, given his condition. So many of those jobs were bagging groceries, working in a grocery store. What he found was he kept getting denied. He kept getting rejected over and over and over from several grocery stores, including grocery stores like Kroger and all their affiliates. And, this was puzzling because obviously he had a work history before his diagnosis. He's a fantastic student, so he definitely has a work ethic. So why did he keep getting rejected? So he was chatting with his dad, and he mentioned, he just said something offhand like, Dad, a lot of these places I applied, they make me take a test. They make me take a personality test. And some of the questions are almost exactly the same kind of questions I got in the hospital when he was diagnosed. So, fortunately and unfortunately for these companies, his dad was an attorney. This set off alarm bells because why are you getting a question that is basically similar to a medical diagnostic at your job place, right? So what happened actually was his father sued. And because he investigated and found that many of these companies, as part of their personality job testing, were using questions that were actually trying to diagnose or detect if someone had a mental illness, and therefore rejecting that person, even if they were still able-bodied and able to work, right? So you see that, problem of excluding certain people from the workplace that can be introduced as part of the quantified worker phenomenon. So, I want to say that AI in the workplace, AI, which is creating the quantified worker, is something that was frankly previewed by others. This is Martin Luther King Jr. speaking in 1961. So oftentimes, MLK is not remembered for all the amazing work that he did for economic justice, for workers' rights. Often that's sort of overlooked for all the other stuff that he did do. But actually, MLK was seeing the writing on the wall, particularly with regard to auto workers, actually, where the workers who were at the forefront of this, because a lot of the auto manufacturing was starting to be automated at that point. And what he saw was that, so many of these men and women were being put out of work because machines were being put in place of what they could do. And there was no plan for them, right? There was no sort of off ramp for them. So he found this troubling. He said, well, what is the point of automation, right? If it's just about creating more products and making people, lose their livelihood? And I think that's the same question we're still asking ourselves, right? Till today. Now, the book is quite large. It's 12 chapters, so I invite you to read all chapters. But I'm going to focus on AI hiring for today. Why do I focus on AI hiring? I focus on AI hiring because guess what? 99% of us, and I dare say 100% of us in this room has either worked or will have to work for a living. And AI hiring is now becoming not a fad, not a trend, but the standard operating procedure for getting a job, right? AI hiring is that gateway. So this shows you sort of the gamut. And these are not the only companies. It's just to show you how widespread it is, right? And how it transcends various industries. It's not just blue collar work. It's not just white collar work. It's not just retail. It's not just finance. It's, right? So many different industries where AI hiring is pretty much now the standard. And I think this is going to be true for all industries soon to come. But what exactly is AI hiring? So I submit to you, as I argue in my book, that AI hiring is actually a misnomer. So when you introduce AI, or the reason for why AI is being introduced in the workplace, it's not to hire more people. It's actually to reject more people quicker, right? So AI hiring is actually automating the labor of rejection. You're automating rejecting more people quicker and saving money while doing it. But you might say, well, okay, so many people are applying, right? So many more people have, education. So many more people are, present and able to work, right? So yes, there's more people to reject. So why not use AI to do it? Well, aren't human beings also biased? Maybe AI is going to be less biased than human beings. Well, when you use AI, you have to understand AI is really made up of algorithms. Algorithms created by what? Human beings. Algorithms are not infallible. They're not inherently objective. They're not inherently free of bias. It all depends on who created them, what assumptions that they had when creating them. So algorithms essentially can reproduce the same patterns of discrimination that you see in humans. So the fact that you're using AI in hiring, it does not remove that bias. And this actually has been shown to be the case. You have headlines of, AI hiring gone wrong. One example of this is that Amazon, right, created an in-house AI hiring tool. And they did this for a good purpose, for a good reason. Amazon realized, oh, wow, our workplace is skewed. It's overwhelmingly male. We don't actually have representative amounts of women in our workplace. And we want to encourage more women to be, software designers, to be, creating apps and stuff. So let's create our own AI hiring tool that can actually recruit and bring in more women. However, the tool they created, it was found to be downgrading women's resumes. Well, that's the opposite result. Why would it do that? Well, one clue might be in the way that AI hiring tools are trained. So there's one thing to create a tool, and then there's another thing to train that tool, right? So you create an AI hiring program. You have to teach that program, what am I looking for in terms of the ideal candidate? A lot of companies, what do? They're like, all right, let's take our top performers from our company. Let's take their resumes And we're going to use those resumes to be the training data for the AI hiring system. And that way the AI hiring system will learn this is the type of resume that someone who we think is a good worker should have. What's the problem with that? Remember what I just said in the previous slide about algorithms reproducing existing biases? So let's say your workforce is 70%, 80% male. Who are going to be your top 10 workers? Right? It's a selection issue. If your workforce is 70, 80% male, then chances are your top 10 workers are probably going to be 70, 80% male. So if you use 10, your top 10 to train that algorithm, 7 or 8 of those resumes are going to be resumes of men. That algorithm is going to pull out all those characteristics, some of which are proxy variables for being male, and they're going to learn, okay, this is a type of resume I should accept, and anything that deviates from this type of resume, I will downgrade. Do you see the problem with that? So you've inadvertently trained your algorithm to be sexist, even if you didn't mean to. So what's the solution, you might ask? Well, first, we have to understand that there's a lot of false binary when we talk about AI or artificial intelligence versus human intelligence. We act like these are two separate things. They are not. Artificial intelligence and human intelligence are not separate. Humans are creating these algorithms. Humans are training these algorithms. Humans are interpreting these algorithms. So how artificial is it? It's not separate from our own intelligence. So we need to question what goes into these programs. We should not ascribe some sort of infallibility to them or some sort of objectivity to them that is somehow different or separate from human intelligence. And really, to underscore that, I think artificial intelligence itself is a misnomer, right? That word was first used in 1956 at a conference in Dartmouth, artificial intelligence. But do you know that at that time, the first computers were human? At that time, the word computer actually referred to a person. And do you know that at that time, those persons were likely to be female? They were women. Most of the first computers, right? What they really were statisticians who calculated things. Most of the first computers were human women. And many of them worked for the government, worked for NASA, etc. So it is interesting that we've forgotten that history, right? And we treat artificial intelligence like it's somehow separate from us. No, artificial intelligence is us. And it should dictate how we use it, how we approach it, how we criticize it, how we question it, how we investigate it, how we review it, how we audit it. So I'll skip this anecdote in the interest of time, but I want to ask you to look up the history of the mechanical Turk, which was a chess-playing machine created in the 1800s, and it was presented as an automaton when it really was not. I'll let you investigate that history for yourself. But with AI hiring, I really want to underscore the problem with AI hiring, which is because of automation bias. This is a theory put forth by Professor Danielle Citron, MacArthur winner, who says that in our society, we have this automation bias where once something is automated, we just tend to think of it as fair, as objective. We tend to not question it. We tend to not look at it too critically. We tend to not look at it too deeply. And that is a problem. And it's especially a problem for automated hiring. So that brings me to the story of the Jareds. The story of the Jareds, which I share in my book, is this. This is a true story, by the way. One company was about to adopt automated hiring for its entire workplace, right? And the company, being savvy, I guess, decided to audit the automated hiring, the AI hiring, before they actually rolled it out. So they hired an employment law lawyer who, approached the vendor, the people who were creating this program, and they said, okay, you've created the program. I want you to audit this program using my clients, right, training data. So using the top, performers, right, from my client's company, audit this program and basically ask this question of the audit. What are the two major factors that this program is going to learn and use for selecting candidates, right? We want to know, because we want to know if the factors even make sense. You want to know what the factors are? Well, number one, that the candidate is named Jared. That's the first factor. Number two, that the candidate played high school lacrosse. Those are the two factors. And you're probably asking yourself, does this job entail playing lacrosse? Why is that a factor, right? And this shows you, right, how AI hiring systems can take on variables that are not actually all that targeted for the job, but they just learn it from the training data. Now, okay, to be fair, you might say, well, maybe there's something about Jareds, right? What's wrong with picking all Jareds? Maybe all the Jareds have been great. Well, let's look at that. We know that in the US, it is unlawful, right, to pick people because of their race for a job, or because of their gender, or because of their national origin, all of these things, right? Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 says you can't discriminate on the basis of race, gender, all of these things. So picking someone because they're named Jared, is that actually unlawful? Well, let's look at it. Who is named Jared? Who is named Jared in the US? Thankfully,